Welcome everyone. Let's give a couple of minutes for others to join us and we will start. It's 11:01, but some people take their time. And it's Thursday. Thank you so much for being here. It's going to be a great session, so we are excited. Okay, so I guess let's get started. It's 11:01 and we don't want to take more time than we need. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2026. We plan to offer more free sessions like this in the future, so stay tuned. Check your emails so you don't miss those invitations. My name is Maya Dimishkovich, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Carroll Community College. And today I have a pleasure of serving as your moderator for this session. So again, thanks for joining us. And the fact that you are here tells me that you are really serious about planning ahead and making sure that your organization is well positioned for the future, especially in the environment where we are experiencing a lot of external forces and changes happening. I don't know about you, but honestly, I feel a little overwhelmed by everything happening. So this is going to be a great session, and our presenter today is John Zeigenfuse, who is the Senior Director of Business Solutions at Carroll Community College. He will share some great frameworks and some practical tools that can help you as a leader make better decisions, understand what are the external forces that you need to keep in mind, and be more confident about your decision-making abilities. So before we get started, let me run through a few quick housekeeping items. At the top of your screen, you should see two buttons. One is a chat feature. That's where you can talk amongst each other, ask any questions, etc. And then there's next to it Q&A. So if you have any questions for John, feel free to submit them throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait until the end, okay? We would love to know who we have joining us today. So if you feel like sharing, please go to chat and let us know maybe your name, your position, and what organization you work at. And please make sure to stay till the end because we have some very helpful handouts that we can share with you. And you can take those handouts to your team and start enhancing or planning for 2026. This session will be recorded, so we'll share the recording with you after, maybe a couple of days after the webinar itself. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, John Zeigenfuse. John works closely with organizations across the region to help leaders navigate uncertainty, anticipate change, and strengthen the strategic planning. So please join me in welcoming John.
Well, thank you very much, Maya. I feel very humbled and yeah, excited about what we're going to be talking about today. So hopefully you are too. So yeah, to be fully transparent right now, this makes me a little nervous, not because of the content we're delivering, but it's really the form. So I am used to doing a lot of these things, but it's usually in person and up front. So I like walking around during these teaching times. As you can see, I got to be, have a seatbelt on, so I keep from moving around. And I like to make it very interactive. And so as Maya and I were kind of developing this a little bit, we wanted to make sure there's an opportunity for questions and even a few polls so I can get feedback. It's really hard to get that kind of feedback, not being in person, but looking through a screen. So that's kind of where we are right now. So delivering this way without moving around takes me a little bit out of my element, but I really want to make it participatory, that we serve your needs well and you have the opportunity to ask questions just like you would in the classroom, that you're just not gaining all this information and figuring out what to do is that you can ask, there's some very personal things as well to your organization and some of the pinch points that you might have. So the way that's going to break this down is I first want to start with a little inspiration. My background is in math and physics, so I live my life by formulas. So it might sound a little formulaic, some of these items we go through, but formulas also take a lot of the guesswork out of things and really sets a framework for you to move from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. So with that being said, the first formula is, the first part of this is going to be hopefully inspirational, some inspiration, why this is important, what is at stake, and maybe some narratives and some storytelling. Then after get through the inspiration, then we're going to go through some information. 2 new words you're going to be introduced to today are going to be VUCA and PESTEL. Maybe some of you have heard those before, or you've actually included some of those in here. If you were in a futures think tank that I had the opportunity to participate in and lead a section of it, those words are now familiar to you, and hopefully you're incorporating them into your dialogue in your organizations. So VUCA, V-U-C-A, and PESTEL, P-E-S-T-E-L are the 2 new words. That's going to be the information part. And then, of course, we always want to end with the application. What does this mean for you? How can you incorporate these things? How can it move the needle forward? So with that, that's kind of the formula. And what I want to talk about is the title maybe got you here, but as I was looking at the title and thinking about the title, I just want to tell you what it is and it isn't. So what's going to happen here going forward is this is not going to be a blueprint where you can actually engineer your future. So it won't be, if you do this, you'll get this. If you do this, you'll get this. And it won't be a blueprint as if you're like building a house and you need to follow everything to the letter of the law or to the T to make sure that everything matches up well. What this maybe could be really compared to more is like a journey. We know what our destination, what we want it to be, and we know where we are now. And there's a great little quote that says, pain is the space between who you are and who you want to be. I like that quote because it really talks about change and going through change, which is sometimes a little bit painful, but it's good. I mean, not all pain is bad, right? We don't want to avoid pain. We kind of want to work ourselves through it. So it's like a journey. And when you think about a journey and a map, boy, you could take the scenic route sometimes. You could take the most direct. You could take the least expensive, or you could take the toll road. There's multiple paths to get there. So this is not a blueprint where one size fits all. You're going to learn and be introduced to some tools today that can really help you plan out which direction you want to go to navigate the future to get to where you want to be in the future. And it's not going to be without some of its pain points, as I said. But I think they can be really helpful. So with that, the very first word I want to introduce you to is the word VUCA, V-U-C-A. It is an acronym. And the background of VUCA is it got probably the initiation of it was right after the Cold War. And it was a military term that happened. It stayed within the military up until about the late 90s, mid 90s, somewhere around there, when people said, hey, this military term, there's a lot of applications for the business world. And it kind of happened during the dot-com era when landscapes were changing day to day, startups, techs, all these things happening, and it was a very uncertain environment. So I'll pull up the slide, what VUCA looks like. It's here. And if you just look at the top half for right now, we'll get to the bottom half, but just look at the top half. You can see why military would use this word right after the Cold War. You can see why the business world maybe adopted is the better word, but adopted it when the landscape and the economic landscape, the tech landscape, the S&P 500 landscape, whatever it was, was moving all over the map. And nobody really could predict anything. It got very complex. And then it really came back a bit stronger in 2008. We all know about the housing crisis, the real estate crisis that happened, and people really locked into this VUCA. Um, and then it became most popular to the general population, obviously during 2020 when we had the COVID situation. And we're still in it a little bit, but things have become a lot more clear, a lot more certain, and not moving all over the map. So as you can see, VUCA, it's volatile. It's up and down. You can get emotional whiplash in a volatile environment. Hey, one day's good, one day it's bad, and maybe some of the things that are hard end up being good, and you don't know where it's going to end up. And then, of course, with the uncertainty, is nobody knows what tomorrow holds, and that predictability kind of went out the window in each one of those situations. And then, of course, complexity as things are so interconnected and one thing affects another one. And then just ambiguity. Well, in 2008, some people got a hold of this VUCA, this ex-military term, and said, I think if we had this negative idea, kind of that top line of VUCA, that we have to manage things well in a volatile, uncertain, and complex and ambiguous environment. Well, can we change that positive by really looking at the landscape, maybe looking at trends, analyzing data, so that things aren't so volatile, but we could create a vision for where we want to go, even in this uncertain environment? Can uncertainty become understanding, where we dip into it and say, maybe a little bit more predictability? We can generate that even as things are going up and down, provide clarity, not just for ourselves, but to all of our stakeholders, whether it be our board, our customers, our employees. And then, of course, remaining agile. We all remember the word, one of the key words during 2020, 2021, the idea of pivot is to stay agile and move things around, okay, and be available for that. So with that being said, as many of you finalize your goals and budgets for the next year, I don't know if you work on the calendar year or the fiscal year, but there's one big question we need to consider. Are your plans currently built to stand up with the pace of change? And that's really what today's session is going to be about. Oops, sorry about that. I advanced the slide before I meant to. Okay, back to that. That change is no longer episodic. It doesn't happen in episodes. It's continual. And we need to be ready for that. So today's session is about us building the capacity to look ahead strategically and not just respond tactically. That's what we really want. So how do we go about doing that? So hopefully that's the inspirational part. But by the end of the session, I've got 4 objectives here. The first one is that we can identify some external forces that are going to impact our organization next year. How do we separate the noise from signals that truly matter? How do we translate those insights into smarter planning and budgeting decisions, and how to build a forward-looking culture that anticipates change? So as I was preparing for this, I don't know if any of you read the book Undaunted Courage. I can't really see anybody's faces, so there's no nodding. That's why I like doing this stuff in person. But Undaunted Courage, if you haven't read it, pick it up and read it. And that would be a great recommendation for even your exec team or your C-suite team, however that works. Not that you have to start a book club, but it's really talks about the story of Lewis and Clark and how they went across the continent to find a way. And in this book, you'll see that they really thought they're going to find a water route until they hit the Rocky Mountains. They realized there was no water route. So what they planned for in their destination didn't happen. They needed to pivot. They needed to change. And there was a great business book written about their decision and decision-making called Canoeing the Mountains, which I would also recommend, that talks about how do you lead when things change? Because change is constant. So, yeah. As I said, this is the time of year where leaders you're setting your goals, defining your KPIs, allocating budgets, and all that stuff. A lot of times, our focus is internal. What's inside the organization? How can we make operations more streamlined? How can we step up our marketing? What kind of staffing holes do we have? But what's often overlooked is what's happening around it, those external forces, from political shifts to technology breakthroughs. Those things kind of reshape the markets faster than our internal plans can adapt. So without the foresight to see those things, we always end up reacting to change instead of leading through it. So there is another formula as we jump into this. If you can envision a pyramid, and the pyramid is divided into 3 sections: the base layer, the middle layer, the top layer, the point. With that being said, is that when change happens, most of us focus on the bottom layer, reacting to change. It's the biggest layer, and that's the one that really impacts us the most day to day. Something happens, we react to it. The middle layer, a little bit smaller, all right, but still very important, is preparing for change. And the very last one, the top part of that pyramid, the very smallest part of the triangle, is creating change. So if you can think about that, a lot of your time is going to be spent on the base layer, reacting to change. This workshop here, and what I hope to give you moving you forward as you talk to all your employees or your exec team, is how do we prepare for the future, so that hopefully we can create a future for ourselves, that we have resilience, and when pressures come our way, we're not shifted to the right or to the left. All right.
John,
Any questions so far? Yes,
yeah,
Maya?
in case you didn't see, we have a poll in chat so you can see the responses. To the first question, how confident are you about your organization being prepared for the future? So thank you everyone who participated.
Yeah,
we have
well,
one more
thank you.
question.
So with that, the 71%, for those of you that responded, are in the neutral. We adjust change as it arises. And that kind of talks leans into that pyramid a little bit. We react to change. What we want to do is move that up. It does take time to prepare for change, anticipate change, and then create change that works in your favor. There was a question once asked of a lot of business leaders. It said, what's the biggest problem most leaders face? Took a lot of responses, came back, and kind of boiled it down to one question, because a lot of those questions come up with, competing priorities, managing people, whether it's conflict or performance issues, takes up a lot of the bandwidth of a lot of these leaders, but they all boil it down to one thing. The biggest problem most leaders have is the inability to anticipate change. Okay, or I'm sorry. The biggest problem most leaders have is the inability to anticipate problems. If you could anticipate problems, then you cut them off before they get big, before they fester for any of those things. Another good book is, you can read it, The Endurance, about Ernest Shackleton, and his ability to anticipate change. And there's been business books and models written about that as well. So whether or not your problem you think is, resource constraints or whatever, we want to be future ready, future prepared for this. I think we're doing okay on time. Has anybody heard of the red car theory? And you can just kind of give a thumbs up. But the idea of the red car theory is, somebody would ask you the question, I could ask you the question, is how many red cars did you see on the way into work today? And most people say, I have no idea how many. I wasn't looking for any. I didn't see any. But if I was to pose the question or the statement, if I gave you $100 for every red car you see on your way home from work today, you know you're going to be looking for those red cars, because it provides an opportunity for you to get $100. And even you'll see some cars, maybe burgundy, maybe even a slight orange. And you'll say, well, that looks red because I want the extra $100. The idea here is, look for opportunities in the forefront, because if you can maximize and capitalize on those opportunities, it's going to serve you really well. Well, great. I see the word cloud up there. The biggest problem is a lot of silos. So how can we forecast and deal with those? Good. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback in that. All right. The second word I want to introduce you to is this idea of pestle. This has gone by a lot of names over the years. It started as what was called STEP, S-T-E-P, then it moved to STEEP, S-T-E-E-P, and now has become PESTEL, P-E-S-T-E-L. And you'll see the acronym and what those words stand for. So as we're doing this, and this is where the poll was helpful, is a lot of times as leaders, we look internally because that is well within the scope of what we do. We can control those things. We can help with materials costs, making decisions that way. We can help with legacy systems that we've inherited, the resources that we have. What the pestle does is says, let's take the shift now, because so much of your bandwidth and your time is spent looking internally at our organization, the things that we leave, the people that depend on us for their guidance, right? The customers that need us. Looks inside. What the pestle does is says, let's stop looking internally. Let's take a moment and actually really scan the horizon and look us externally at these factors that impact every organization and every business. Some in big ways, some in very small ways, but all of them are somewhat connected. So obviously the political, we're living in a political environment where sometimes you can get that emotional whiplash that I talked about. One day you've been doing things this way, and then there's an executive order, and the next day you got to change gears pretty quickly. Economic and inflation, all right, the labor markets, consumer confidence. I think one of the things that also plays in that is the employability of people affects your economics. Societal, the demographics, workforce values, behavior shifts. I'm 57 years old, but I remember when the millennials entered the workforce and everybody was talking about how do we engage them better. And now I remember the millennials talking about the Gen Zers, the language and their ideas. So there's some real behavior shifts as it comes to generations working and entering the workforce. Technological, of course, you see AI there. Everyone's talking about it's the shiny new thing. How do we incorporate that and use it to serve us well? And what things do we need to be careful of? I like the idea of that digital transformation. I'll do a little case study with you in a second, and then environmental and legal. For me, the easiest one to talk about is technology, because it's all over the map. We use it every day, but it's also the easiest to see and anticipate. Some of the other ones get a little bit more gray because a policy shift in the political or the legal environment, you might not feel that till a couple years down the road. I mean, our solar industry is facing that right now. There was an executive order about no more rebates or tax rebates, and the scrambling that's going around. But they actually had about 6 months, 8 months to deal with that. But moving on, I love this idea of diving into some of these a little bit deeper. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know with that. But there it is, the pestle analysis. So how do we use a pestle analysis to serve us well? When we go ahead and say, let's look at the political landscape out there. Is there any trends that we see? Any things coming down the road that might affect us? What kind of regulations, elections, public investment? Okay, or the economic, what's happening with inflation and our consumer confidence. So if you look down the road and you start doing that and having these questions, what you're going to do is you're going to identify a few things that are very impactful for you. One is this idea of, if you see step 2, it's mapping against a SWOT. You have to do a SWOT analysis. This is where this works best. So after you do the pestle analysis, say what political things might affect us, whether we're in the for-profit or the nonprofit sector. What kind of economic things might affect us whether in the for-profit, manufacturing, nonprofit sector. Identify those things. And as you put them down with your executive team and list those things, what you're going to do is you're going to move them into different columns. So have a center column, list all these things that you think as you do environmental scan that can have a positive or negative effect on your organization. There's going to have an effect. And then you're going to move them to one side to say, hey, this acts as a tailwind. This is something that's from behind us that's going to push us forward a little bit further. And this acts as a headwind that's going to be somewhat of a constraint. And some of those things, depending on your occupation, your organization, it could be maybe neutral. You may want to keep some there. A really good example coming from the higher education world would be what's called the demographic cliff that is coming our way. The demographic cliff kind of started in 2008 when people started having fewer children and children later in life because of the uncertainty of the VUCA environment of the economic and the housing crisis that was there. So that is about 18 years ago. And what you know, those kids that were then born, fewer and fewer of them, has now come to high school graduation age and are now going to be entering into college. And what we've seen is there's a lot more people graduating from college right now than can be replaced by the incoming freshman class. It's just a huge demographic cliff. Now play that forward, that's going to come into the vocational world and the workplace environment. Because after they graduate, there's going to be fewer and fewer people. We're not replacing ourselves as quickly as we need to. It's not going to be a balance even. And so there's a demographic cliff coming if you look at that. And what are you prepared to do that with that? So we know that colleges are all scrambling for a very small pool of people graduating from colleges. Have you seen in high schools, 3A schools move down to 2A schools? We've seen schools combining. Even in the college area, we've seen schools purchasing other schools because they just can't maintain it on their own. So we've got this whole demographic cliff coming, but what might be a headwind for others in the college world could be a tailwind as well. Because we know that as people age out and grow, that the largest workforce right now is what's called the Gen Xers. They're all coming up to retirement age. So what does that do for people that do with assisted living or community living? Is there's going to be a greater number of people looking for that. And so that could be a tailwind in that environment, but it's a headwind in another environment. The other thing that affects us as a college is there's been an increasing lack of interest in higher education. And this is how we've dealt with it here, and you have to figure out how you're going to deal with it, is that we haven't seen people at this rate not interested in pursuing a four-year degree since 1970. Only 30% right now of high school graduates are looking to get a four-year degree. A few years ago, that was up about 56%. So it's now down to 30. That's the lowest since 1970. So what that tells us is sometimes the academic world might be falling off a little bit, but boy, the vocational world has a bigger pool of people right now. So we have a workforce readiness program. And then now we're doing licensures, certifications to get people in the trades like electrical, HVAC. We can't find enough instructors for the demand. And so that's great for us. So that is neutral. In one area for our for-credit side, it acts as a headwind, but on our non-credit side is really acting as a tailwind. And we've seen these numbers grow for us. So that's in our realm here in the college, but the road is wide of examples that are all across the board. So I'm going to pause there real quick and see if there's any questions anybody might have. Maya, are we good? I want to make it interactive. No questions?
Sorry, I was muted, but there are some responses to the poll you can see in chat.
Okay.
So we got a question, which external forces currently pose the greatest strategic risk or opportunity for your organization?
Okay. So I see, yeah, economic for sure is at the front, and that might be inflationary. That could be tariffs. That could be, paying for salaries with the rise of the minimum wage. I'm not sure in which area that affects you, but it does come down to dollars and cents for most of us. If you're in the for-profit world, it's trying to make a profit. I mean, a profit off the goods and services you do and offer to people. And in the nonprofit, it's really probably going to be the services. Yeah, there's a lot of grants that go along with the nonprofit that kind of make dealing with those things a little tough right now, because you don't know for grant writing and things that funding from the public sector, as quick as the faucet gets turned on, it can get turned off, and dealing with that. And so trying to figure out what can we do. And there's some opportunities out there, I guarantee it. For those of you in the nonprofit that are on this call, it's there's a lot of nonprofits that have managed it well, and we just need to learn from them that have gone from public funding into private funding, and having those, because that can get turned on and off, but it's really about the relationships and not about what executive order comes down the road at that point. So,
and we have a good question, and I can definitely relate to this because there's so much happening right now. So how do we balance preparing for the future without overreacting to every trend, every headline, everything that comes at us? How do we do that?
Okay. So if I remember correctly, that goes with objective number 3. How do we separate the noise from things that really, so every headline is going to be coming your way. I recommend what I would call like beta testing on that. So the idea is scan widely, okay, and then select narrowly. So let the time say, okay, all these things are coming our way. All these things are coming our way. And then look for trends. One of the first things you could do is say, has something like this happened before? Can we look at data? We got all kinds of historical data. Gallup is great. Bain Associates are great for all that historical data. And see if it's happened before. If it's happened before, patterns tend to repeat themselves. If it's just this one off, and there's a lot of noise, is start having a discussion about it, but don't invest a lot of time, because it could just be noise and die down. I think one of the good illustrations would be, kind of like waves coming in, right? Or maybe a better example is, as we're anticipating some snow this weekend, is this going to be a blizzard that is loud but short-lived? Is this going to be something that affects us like a winter? Is this a 3 to 4 month in the winter, or a 3 to 4 year thing for us in the business world? Or is this kind of like an ice age? Is this going to change the climate? A great example, AI is kind of seismic enough that it's going to change the landscape of how work is done. We need to embrace it now. Okay, so that's something that is, you need to dive in there. That's not noise. Some other things like political stuff and elected officials, well, that's kind of like a winter. That's going to be a 4 to 8 year cycle for many of us. And then there's things that are societal, that get a lot of attention on the news, that get a lot of attention from emotions, but they're short-lived. And that's kind of the noise, because you don't want to make executive decisions based on very temporal temporary feedback. So we're looking more long-term. So there is some predictability in it. That's a great question. I know I didn't answer in completion, but we can have some of these conversations offline, because there are some ways to do that. So anything else, Maya?
That's it for now.
Okay. So some of you might be thinking like, boy, there's so many things in the pestle. There's 6 things there. I could come up with 2 or 3 things. And you might be thinking, how many future scenarios should we realistically plan for without spreading ourselves too thin? Most organizations don't need to have a dozen different scenarios. In fact, that often creates confusion. What my recommendation is in doing the pestle analysis is plan for 3. A most likely scenario, a best case scenario, and a worst case scenario. So if you do that pestle and you put things into headwinds and tailwinds, then you're going to force rank them and put them, which ones will have the most impact on your organization, which ones will have the least impact. Okay, which one do we think are most likely, which ones do we think will serve us well. A best case be that tailwind that we desire, and the worst case be our strongest headwind. And just look at 3 of those to start. Because the real value isn't in predicting which one's going to happen. It's in asking the questions, what would we do differently if this became a reality? So scenario planning is a rehearsal, not a forecast. And then if and when it happens, you are prepared for it and don't have to react. So you've moved to that middle layer from just reacting to change to preparing for change. And you're preparing for the scenarios. It's like doing a fire drill, right? If this happens, worst case scenario, where does everybody go? Do we have the roster? Is everybody a safe distance away? Boom. So you plan for that worst case. So when it happens, or if it happens, you know what to do, exactly what to do, and you have that plan. Let me keep moving. So if there's any other questions, you can throw in the chat and Maya will throw it our way. Here's how the pestle, if you've done the pestle, and you look at it, you see these 2 graphs here. There's kind of on the right-hand side, I put a negative. On the left-hand side, I put a positive. You can change those to headwinds and tailwinds, things that are going to move your organization forward and things that are going to make it a little bit harder to operate in that environment. All right, what are the tailwinds? So let's talk about the tailwinds or the negative part first. Is once you go ahead and kind of, before maybe you force rank them or maybe you do have already force ranked them, is you plot them out on a graph a little bit. And you do this with your exec team or your C-suite team or maybe even your board, whatever stakeholders you want to include in this discussion. It could be even frontline workers or a mix of each. And you see that the horizontal axis is the probability. And it's a guessing game. That's why we kind of kept it very vague. And the impact, that's not much of a guessing game because you can feel that, you know that internally through doing your SWOT, what threats are to your organization. And then if you kind of extended those lines where those red tick marks are, it would divide it into quadrants. And the same thing over there on the positive side. You know, the opportunities that are the red car theory. What should we be looking for? And if it happens, we want to double down. We want to move in that direction. And then, of course, the feasibility, you know, how likely are you to take advantage of this? Are you positioned well to take advantage of this? And the scale or scope that it could have by doing something new, bringing something in, starting something different could have for your organization, the scale or scope for it. So moving forward, what this looks like is it creates these 4 quadrants. What I would encourage you to do is after you kind of force rank them, start plotting them on here. What do I think is the probability? I'm on the right-hand side, the negative side. What do I think is the probability this is going to happen? That tick mark's right in the middle, 50%. If we think it's in quadrant C, high probability, quadrant B, low probability. Anything that ends up in that low probability, just hold off on yet. Anything that's a high probability, you want to give a little bit more attention to. Right? And then the impact that it could have for your organization. All right, above that, it's going to have significant impact. Below, not much. So you have these quadrants, and you can rank them. But you see anything that's in a B quadrant, that's low probability and low impact. If you've done your pestle scan, and you've talked about it as a team, and you've kind of force ranked it, and you put it, you map it. If it ends up in B, do not make that one of your key issues to try to resolve. If it's low probability and it's not going to impact you very much, it's not worth your time because you can't do everything. You have to pick and choose. Quadrants A and C are the hardest ones to kind of figure out. If it's a high probability but little impact, you have to have these discussions with your team, right? It's not about creating a blueprint. It's figuring out the journey. Which way do we want to go? Do we want to go the scenic route, the most direct route? You know, if you're in that C category, if it's high probability and it's going to have move the needle forward in your organization a little bit, hey, any growth is good growth, right? If it's low probability, but it has significant impact, again, you're going to have a wrestling match with your executive team to say, where can we invest our time and our energy and maybe some other resources, maybe some human capital, maybe some physical capital to do that. But if it could affect your organization greatly, but there's a little probability, have a plan ready. Do the plan. Now, of course, then quadrant D is the one that needs your time and attention. If it's highly probable and it's going to impact you greatly, you got to double down on that and be ready for that. You don't want to get caught. And so then when you do that, you double down and you're starting to now move to the top layer, the creating the change. We're positioned well. When that opportunity happens, we're going to jump and it's going to serve our organization very well. Okay. So, back and forth, you can look at those. So quadrant B gets very little to no attention. Quadrant A and C, you have to have those conversations. And quadrant D is a no-brainer. Okay. So hopefully that helps as you talk about doing the pestle and then how do we put it to use? And real quick, I know we're kind of running out of time, we're already about 40 minutes in, is there was an organization I was working with. It was in the trades. It was HVAC company, about a small to medium enterprise. They had generated about 50 million in revenue. And when COVID hit and I was working with them, a lot of construction stopped. People got scared having people on their property. So new construction stopped. And as people learned to pivot, that was one of the conversations we had. And I wish we could have anticipated a little bit more. But we looked at the scan. We had to react to change, but then we were also able to prepare for it. As we reacted to change, doubled down not on the new construction, but on service contracts. And service contracts, everybody still needs air conditioning, ventilation, heating. So we worked on that, and they blew up their service part of their industry while construction was down, from what was about a 1.7 million, all right, to about 6.5 million, almost 10x it in a very short time because there was problems with acquiring new equipment, so they needed people to repair it. And they doubled out, and that has become a big part of their industry. Even as techs have become less and less, technicians, is they're doing really well right now. And so it's just wonderful to see the pestle really at work when you can scan the horizon, look at things, construction's dwindling, people are fearful of COVID, but they still need HVAC. How do we manage that well? And they did a wonderful job. So any questions right now before we move on?
I think we're good to move on. So we have about 17 minutes left, and I know we still have a lot to cover. So let's do it, John.
Okay, perfect. So quick thing as we transition to the next slide, if you wanted to start tomorrow, what are the first 3 actions that I would recommend for you is identify the top 2 to 3 external forces that would most impact your organization next 12 to 24 months. Do that. And then I'd ask you to challenge one core assumption that your leadership team is currently making. And then step 3 would establish a regular environmental scan cadence for even short-term quarterly check-ins. You don't need a perfect system. You just need a consistent one. Right? There's a great quote I used by Peter Drucker. Maybe some of you guys have heard it, great business mind. He says, the best way to predict the future is for you to create it. So if you're having trouble predicting the future, which we all do, if we didn't, we'd all play the winning Powerball numbers, right? But the best way to predict the future is for you to create it. So moving on that little triangle that I said is you can react to change, you can prepare for change, we could kind of create change. All right. So most organizations live in the reaction mode, and so solving the problems as they appear. But the most resilient ones have built in some early warning systems. You don't just wait for the disruption, you can forecast it. And the shift is kind of basically from being reactive to being proactive, taking a page out of Jim Collins's book. But you can make decisions with greater confidence and not uncertainty, and you can spot opportunities before your competitors can. So, and we've seen those benefits play out right here, even in our community. So as you're thinking about this, what's the risk of not acting on early indicators for you? The risk is that opportunities and options will disappear, and then you're stuck with whatever's left over. The idea of these early indicators as we do these horizon scans gives us a lot of flexibility, a time to test, adjust, and learn. And then if you wait too long, the choices are going to become fewer and fewer and fewer. And then we just have to react. We move down the pyramid rather than up the pyramid. So in many cases, the cost of waiting exceeds the cost of acting imperfectly. Imperfectly, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, think about that. Is that moving and being somewhat imperfect is okay rather than trying to come up with the best scenario and just waiting and waiting and waiting. So that's a Peter Drucker quote. I love it. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Some conversations you can have with your team, some deep dive discussions to help you figure out this political and the pestle scan is there's a question. Which of the pestle factors currently the most volatile for your industry? And how might that volatility require you to adapt your strategy in the next 12 to 24 months? That's a question you need to ask yourselves and wrestle with. And I remember in the previous poll, I can still see it. It's in the economic, which is the most volatile for your industry and the most important. So you've identified the factor, and that's just you. You might want to have the conversation with your executive team or your C-suites or your board members. So yeah, so that's a great question. To follow that up is looking at these pestle factors is how do you protect yourself long term? Like your long-term initiatives when the short-term pressures are dominating your decision making all the time, right? We talked about just bandwidth, and I want to have the time to think long term and build this cadence in, but I'm constantly reacting to people coming with problems or issues or things I need to resolve. So how do you do that? My suggestion is think of about your like your financial portfolio, right? You want to invest in things that have high yield, maybe short term, and things that are long term and maybe low yields, kind of the slow growth. Is protect yourself that way. Try to do both. So you have to build in a cadence. So because short-term pressures are always going to exist. But the organizations that protect themselves, long-term initiatives, you do it intentionally and optimistically. And it just means being aligning, making sure somebody's doing it, assigning it, maybe what we would call ring fencing, that the resources that you have for long-term don't get reallocated, that they stay for that. So in defining stages, don't look at the long term. Another deep dive discussion for the uncertainty and strategic agility is what assumptions are we making today that could be invalidated by a shift in any pestle factor? And how do we prepare for multiple future scenarios? We talked about some of that previously, so we don't have to go into that long term. And another one, when it comes to complexity and interdependence of the VUCA environment and the pestle, is where do we see interconnected risk across multiple pestle dimensions? When you see interconnected risk, those are the ones that you should automatically gravitate to for giving your time and attention to coming up with a best case / worst case scenario. And how might the complexity challenge decision making at any executive level? That's a good question for you to wrestle with for your team. So these are great questions to deal with. And the last one, making any decisions at executive level compensate for the shifting landscape. So, yeah, so have these conversations. And as Maya said, this is being recorded and we can send you this information, these questions, that you can talk about it with your exec team to say, how do we prepare for the future? How do we future-proof ourselves? Take advantage of the opportunities that we don't see yet, because now we're going to start looking for them and prepare ourselves for the risks that are coming our way so that we can insulate ourselves or build a moat around ourselves when they come. They don't rock our world and our organization and our services as much as they have in the past. And the last one for you to think about is, how are you preparing for these changes? What are the risks if you ignore that? How might it change your business model? And what are some of the early indicators? So, well, good. We're doing well. We got about 10 minutes left. So I did want to have opportunity for maybe a few questions you could put in the chat and give it to Maya. And then we're going to take the last like 3 minutes to talk about how we can support you moving forward. Maya mentioned in the very beginning in the introduction that we're going to have an opportunity to give you some resources to fill out and have your team do, and then come back and compile them. And then you start moving them as a headwind or a tailwind, and then you start force ranking them, and then you start mapping them on the graph. So those are going to be some of the resources. So we need to save about 3 minutes for that at the end, and we'll show those to you. But we have about 6 or 7 minutes for some questions coming our way. So I see somebody is typing one, but Maya, have there been any that have happened that I haven't seen yet?
Yeah, yep, I do have a couple of questions, and I also want to comment that just in a few minutes, we'll share with you some handouts, and those handouts include the questions that John just covered. So you can take those handouts, bring them back to your organization, and start asking deeper questions and start planning. One question I have for you, John, is what is one question every leader should be asking on a regular basis, and they usually don't?
I would say, well, great question. So thank you for putting me on the spot. But I would say that question might be has to do with looking at your current state and then thinking about the future. And this is in context of the PESTEL analysis. This is in the context of this webinar. But maybe the question could be, what are we currently doing that might not make sense for us 2 years from now? Okay, so ask that question. What are you currently doing? What am I currently doing that might not make sense in 2 years? So it gives you a little internal look at what you're doing, and then anticipating if there might be some changes. And like I said, the technology is an easy one to go through because that's so obvious. The other ones are a little bit more harder to see, and you got to look a little bit closer. So I think that's a good question to ask yourself.
I like it. I will keep asking myself this question and my team as well. Next question is, I know, John, you work with a lot of different organizations in the region. So the question is, what are some of the common mistakes you see those organizations or leaders make when trying to future-proof their organization?
What are some common mistakes? Say that one more time, Maya.
What are some common mistakes that organizations make when trying to future-proof their organization?
Okay. I think the first one would be acting like future-proofing is a one-time decision. Okay, we had the decision. If I could use the analogy of evacuating students from a building. I don't know why that's on my head, like a fire drill. You come up with a fire drill in theory, right? Or fire plan, a fire evacuation plan in theory. Then you do a plan and you beta test it in a very controlled environment, and then you make modifications to it. Oh, that didn't work. We had people stay back. We didn't have the rosters with us, and you make modifications, and then you adjust your fire emergency plan. And then as new things happen, like in the school systems, okay, like intruder alerts or the, all those things. So you don't treat it like a one-time exercise, and we have a plan, we put in the file, and don't use it again until it happens. It's beta tested in small settings. What would this happen? Make refinements to it, and then come back and revisit it over and over again. So don't treat it like a one-time exercise. And there's probably a few other things, but that's one that comes to mind. Yeah, if you give me a second, I might be able to come up with another one.
I think I can see how it's very common. And another thing that I think is very common is people invest a lot of time and resources into developing plans and conducting environmental scanning and the SWOT analysis. And then it just goes on a shelf, or it just sits in your files, and it becomes not a document that you use on a regular basis. So the question to you is, how can you avoid it? How can you make your strategic plan or PESTEL analysis like a living and breathing document that everybody is referring to?
So you need to revisit it over and over again, making adjustments. So it needs to be part of your regular cadence.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at your uh, every 6 months, have a leadership team retreat that lasts 2 to 3 hours. Maybe it's a full day. Revisit your pestle analysis, go through another environmental scan, go through and force rank them again, and make that part. If it keeps coming up, then you say, is our plan work? Because new information is going to come. There's going to be new technology. There's going to be new executive orders. There's going to be new economic growth or opportunities. So you have to stay agile with it. And remember, in the VUCA, there's moving from ambiguous, the A, to agility, is you have to have it in a regular cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just needs to be in your calendar and your plan. I think one more thing why it fails sometimes is nobody owns it, right? So somebody's got to own it, and it should be actually a group. And I would really think the executive team, and then sharing some of this information so that you get great alignment all the way from the top down, from your board to C-suite to exec team to middle management to frontline workers. Okay, it's like this is what we're preparing for. And being open and honest and vulnerable in those things, great, because it actually gives a lot of confidence. And you're investing in the human capital, which is so important. Like these people got their act together. They know what they're talking about. They're planning for this, and they're not going to react. In fact, they're not only planning, they might actually be creating opportunities for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I know we have a couple more slides to go through, and let's get to those handouts.
Okay.
So one can take them back.
Yeah. So this is how we can support you. We're going to provide with you the scans. Okay. You're going to get some, there's opportunities for some additional workshops. As I said, this is not just the one and done. This is the first of many. Help you with some of your strategy. And we can even come to your organization and train the exec team on this. Is that we just want to position ourselves as a resource. We're Carroll Community College. We want to help the community. And my part here is called Business Solutions, that we can help walk through this. I've done this a number of times with a number of organizations, whether for-profit or nonprofit, and we just want to be a resource to you guys. So yeah, just a way to have some ongoing conversations in an area for us to do this. So yeah, we really want to help. Yeah. I think that's it for that slide. So, and then here are the handouts that you'll see there. Handout 1 is called an Imagine exercise. So you're looking at the future. So remember, I said pain is the space between who you are and who you want to be. As the Imagine exercise is great. I know we live in an agricultural county. I built a lot of fences. I have a 7-acre mini farm. I built a lot of fence, and I used to do it very poorly for a long period of time. I've gotten better at it. But the goal here is put the first post in the ground, and then you put the last post in the ground, and you run a string to connect the two. Then every post you put in between will be in a perfect alignment. And I've created many zigzag fence, but this is the idea of the Imagine exercise, is putting the last post in the ground. So do your SWOT analysis as our first post. Talk about your core values, your mission, vision, the first post. Who you want to be is the last post in your Imagine exercise. And then you can help fill in the space in between. It does take work, all right, but that's how you'll get there. The Imagine exercise is the last post. Then you'll see there is a scan here for the pestle analysis. And ask yourself those questions. What do we see maybe happening in the next year, the next 3 to 5 years, and the next 10 years? It gets harder to predict. If you look at this like a bullseye, concentric circles moving out, the closer you are to the 1 year, your actually predictions will probably be more accurate. As you get out to 3 to 5 years, it becomes a little bit harder, and 10 years can be really tough to do that. But the further you get away from where you are now, it's a little bit harder. That's why the agility part of the pestle analysis and redoing it every 6 months is so critical, because new information is going to come, new technology is going to happen, new politicians will be elected. So you have to stay agile with that. It's got to be a living, breathing document, as Mai said. And that brings us, that is our last slide. And I think we might be out of time. But again, going back this one, how can we support you? Is we can help you with some scans. We can create some customized ones. We can actually do some workshops at your organization. We can help develop some strategy, and then of course doing some training. So yeah, look at us as a partner to assist you with this.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I will email you those handouts in just a few seconds, so you have them available in your mailbox, and go plan, go strategize. Thank you, John.
Thank you for your time. I hope it made sense. If it didn't, feel free to shoot me an email and we can have a conversation at a coffee or whatever and just talk about some next steps and follow up on any questions you might have. So thank you for your time.
John, quick question. Is the book you reference reading Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, that's it. If you're looking to launch this, I know I'm going over time, but get people thinking. We all know that we need to talk about this as a priority. I guess reading the book and having discussions, because there's lots of great wisdom. So it's Undaunted Courage tells a story, but then Canoeing the Mountains talks about business principles learned from the Lewis and Clark expedition and how they had to change plans. Another great one, like I said, is Endurance. And there's some really good business books written about Shackleton's way to navigate in a very VUCA environment as you're stranded in Antarctica. But those are wonderful. And it gets people talking and thinking and processing. And then you say, now let's apply it to us. And so it's very entertaining. It touches the heart. And then as you work together, then you go cognitive in the cognitive domain and strategize. And then you're able to put it in a very physical domain in the practical, in the doing part. So it really touches on all three dimensions of a person and a team. It's your emotions, your intelligence, and your physical ability to actually make change.
Great.
Oh.
Thanks, John.
All right, I went over. Sorry, Maya. Sorry, everybody
That's
else.
okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.